this is Liz from People I Think Are Cool, a bi-weekly podcast where I interview my favorite creatives from across the globe. If you're looking for a dose of creative inspiration, then go to peopleithinkarecool.com or subscribe to People I Think Are Cool on iTunes and Stitcher.
You like film, from cult to classic, from blockbuster to B-movies. And there just isn't that one place with all the fan fervor and passion that's covering the kind of mad, diverse brilliance that you love.
Well, that's where you're wrong.
AfterMovieDiner.com is that fan-built movie nirvana just for you, featuring the sweet, sweet writings of the wife dork herself. AfterMovieDiner.com. Go there. Be the best you can be.
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast, the official podcast of the Alamo Drafthouse, Winchester.
Welcome to another edition of the It podcast. Joining us is Brian Young, the Turtle Dork.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Also joining us is Lisa Gullickson, wife dork.
Hello.
And Brad Gullickson, mouth dork.
I'm a rolling thunder, a pouring rain. I'm coming on like a hurricane.
Okay.
Hell's bells.
And also joining us is Billy Daz, the indie dork.
Yeah, what's up, everybody?
And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the disco dork. And welcome to another edition of the It podcast, Fistful Friday. Dun, 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 dun,
Oh. What's happening?
It's Friday.
And then we just had the election.
We all voted on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
Everything worked out our way, maybe.
Everything's fine. We're not all in Canada now.
Oh.
I voted independent.
Oh, son of a
I
bitch.
can murder you with
Wow.
this crayon that I'm holding.
Wow.
Just
Ladies
go
and
right in your
gentlemen,
esophagus.
happy Friday, TGIFF. Hopefully you did vote, by the way.
I did twice.
Lisa did twice. That does not mean you didn't have to.
I got everybody in the cemetery to vote for me.
So this Friday, in honor of the release of Overlord, which is a film that we got to see at Fantastic Fest.
Yes.
And not at all topically related to the current political situation in any way, shape, or form.
No.
No.
Not at all. Not at all.
I hope not. We have
Ours is a much more of a man in the high tower situation.
True
High
that.
Castle.
Whatever.
We got
Tower
a fistful of
Castle.
World War II.
Mine is a mix between Faulty Towers and Man in the High Castle, and it's hilarious and sad.
I'd watch that.
I actually would, yeah. that's
Don't
good.
mention the war, because
The Germans won.
the Germans won, yeah.
We have a fistful of World War II, ladies and gentlemen. So, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Started off. Do you have a number 5?
Yeah, I do have a number 5. You know, I've been struggling trying to make this list right before we got put on air. So what?
That's so
That's
weird.
not an excuse.
Yeah, I know. It's so shocking.
So
how
sorry that my homework is subpar, Teach.
yeah. At least I turned it in.
Yeah, that's true.
No, actually, that is true.
Put me in the game, coach. You know what? We were talking about a movie, and it was a bad movie, and you guys were like kind of making fun of it a little bit. It's like, yeah, you should put it on. You know what? It's going on my list. Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Because of my former love of Josh Hartnett.
Former.
You still
No,
love it.
Incorrect.
Still your
Yeah.
bae.
I mean, he doesn't work as much, man, and you know, I don't know.
He falls on rough times, and you just cast him aside.
He was in Oh Lucy. He was great
Yeah,
in Oh
he
Lucy.
was great.
Bunraku.
Bunraku. It was
Wow.
that was a fun movie. I like Bunraku.
See?
And of course he was in Penny Dreadful on Showtime that got canceled.
Did
But
you like
now
that
it's
show?
coming. It's in my wish list. It's on my queue in Netflix. So I'll watch it at some point.
Is he coming back for the new? Because they just announced the new one.
I don't know. I don't know what the new one's about. So it's going to be interesting to see because a lot of people love that show. Anyway, World War II. Pearl Harbor. Terrible movie. Way too long. Way over dramatic. It's Michael Bay trying to really run on the coattails of Titanic because of how successful Titanic was with telling this kind of like this epic historical tale with this very intimate love story. And he was not able to kind of recreate this with this three-way romance, this love triangle. It's bullshit. Anyway,
It's bullshit?
It's bullshit, but
I'm going to tell you something right now, Brian.
I love
don't know
Josh.
if you remember, but my grandfather
Oh.
and his best friend were on the USS Corey on D-Day when they took fire from Omaha Beach, actually Utah Beach, and then the ship sank, and then his buddy Pete died, and my grandfather married his widow.
Oh.
Which is almost the exact same plot of Pearl Harbor.
Oh.
And you just called their love bullshit?
Oh, man.
Why'd you do that, Brian?
I feel about 3 centimeters tall.
But here's the thing. This movie's garbage.
Oh, thank you. You saved me. You saved me, Brad. You saved me. Thank you. But that is a great story, and it does. You are right. These type of tales can actually happen in real life. It can happen in real life.
Isn't that bullshit?
No. I don't know if I could marry my best friend's widow, but
I would kill you, motherfucker. I would haunt your marriage would be so shitty because neither of you would sleep because I would haunt you both forever.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't. I couldn't. I couldn't do that.
Secondsies, no thanks.
Yeah.
Peace, support, and comfort, and your love, Brian.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. But you're right.
Oh, what a moral quandary.
Brad's
I know.
grandma, total banger. Hot
Wow.
I wish the listeners could see Brad as he's like nodding his head.
Oh man.
All true.
That was priceless, man. We gotta get this on video.
Yeah, so it's weird because the movie is so terrible, but every time I watch it, I think about my grandparents.
That's interesting.
And how my
During the
grandfather-
lovemaking scenes?
Oh, well, I mean, I think about them during every movie lovemaking scene. That's just normal.
Oh, my little factoid about Pearl Harbor. So Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character in the film.
Oh yeah,
He went to school. My grandmother went to that
the
school.
real guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's some things to take away from this movie. It's just poorly done. It's just really poorly done. And,
What about when that CG bomb goes into the stack of the ship? Woo!
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean that's a cool little shot.
No, it's not.
Pearl
It's
Harbor
terrible.
had a dope trailer. You remember
It
that
had
trailer?
a great trailer.
You remember
A
that trailer
great-
that Hans Zimmer scored?
It's a great-
that clock
yeah,
ticking as the
yeah,
planes
yeah.
fly through the valley.
Yeah, it's a great
Oh
trailer.
my goodness.
And the best representation of FDR ever, John Voight.
Oh, when he stands
yeah.
up.
Whoa.
Yeah, he's like, he's at the board meeting. And he's like, I'm going to show you what determination is. I can defeat polio in this moment.
That was like something straight out of a spoof movie.
Is there a scene in that movie where somebody stands on a runway with like a giant ass machine gun and shoots at planes doing dive bomb runs on the base?
Ooh,
I think so.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm not
Probably.
sure.
That is the only visual I have in my head of Pearl Harbor, by the way.
But we talked about this movie for way too long, so that's my number 5. Josh Hartnett is great.
All right, Wife Dork.
Yes.
You're number 5.
My number 5. This is my number 5 because Brad mentioned it on his Fistful of 90s. But in my heart, this is way higher on my list, and that is The Rocketeer, directed by Joe Johnson.
Yeah.
I love this
Keep
movie.
forgetting about that movie.
How dare you?
I don't know.
Because
Sorry.
it's wonderful. And yeah,
When was the last time you've seen that movie?
it's been years. It's been since we've been married. We've watched it. I feel like, don't you?
You rewatched that recently, Brad?
Yeah, whenever the Blu-ray came out, that was probably the last time. That was only a couple of years ago.
Did it hold up?
Oh yeah, it's a
Hell
great
yeah.
movie, yeah. Oh yeah.
Billy Campbell, dreamy.
Yeah.
He's got that '90s floppy hair.
Yeah.
The restaurant's inside of a dog.
What?
Wait,
Remember,
what?
it's a bulldog-shaped
Yeah.
restaurant.
Shit.
Not in an actual dog.
That'd be very tight.
I was like, wait a minute, how's that?
It's too dark
I
to
don't
eat in a
remember
dog.
that movie at all.
Jennifer Connelly is like gorgeous.
Oh.
I want to
Yeah.
be her when I grow up.
She like never ages.
And Timothy Dalton.
Timothy Dalton's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
As the Nazi sympathizing actor swashbuckler.
Yeah.
Terry
Yeah.
O'Quinn as Howard Hughes.
Fuck yeah, good Terry O'Quinn role.
Yeah.
I have to rewatch
Paul
that movie.
Sorvino as a mobster.
It's actually
But
really
he
well
hates
cast.
Nazis still. That's when the government teams up with mobsters to take
Look,
down
man,
Nazis. Come on.
even organized crime understood that Nazis were bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great pick. I gotta
Clint
rewatch
Howard
Rocketeer.
is in that movie.
Yeah.
Is he?
He plays Mark. I don't remember
He plays
him at
Mark.
all. I just went through the IMDb and was like,
Plays
I know that
Mark.
guy.
Come on, he plays Mark. I obviously know who he is in this movie.
You know, he played one of the books of the Bible.
Nice. Nice.
All right. Rock.
Apparently, they were planning on doing sequels of it, but
It made $0.
didn't-
Well, I
didn't
think
do-
that
do
it was
so well at the box
something
office.
announced that they are going
Recently.
to make a sequel. I don't know. It's not going to be called. It's not going to be a direct sequel to The Rocketeer, but I think it's going to focus on.
Who's a female?
It's supposed to be a female,
Yeah,
but it may be
it's
like
called,
a group of females.
The Rocketeer 2049.
Holy shit!
You're on fire tonight.
Denis Villeneuve is directing that shit too.
I'd love that.
But I think they are going to at least try to reignite that property and do something else with it, from what I heard. So it'd be cool to see what they do with that.
All right.
Yeah.
That was a Marvel comic, though, right?
No, it was an independent comic.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, and then I think Dark Horse was printing it for a little while, and I want to say IDW has the rights at the moment.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. B, your number 5.
That's me.
Yeah.
My number 5 is one of my favorite films from last year. It was my third favorite film from last year.
Oh, yes.
Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk.
Right.
You know, we talked about it in our Dorkies, but I was really worried that watching it at home, even on my gargantuan widescreen TV, that it was going to lose the effect of the IMAX experience. And I am happy to report, no, it is still an amazing watch, even on my 400-inch TV. It's still looks good on that 400-inch.
I watched it on my iPhone in bed. It worked great.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, just like Christopher Nolan.
You just
intended.
hold it
That
real
dude can
close.
eat a dick. I do not care.
No. All kidding aside, I have a 65-inch, and it looks awesome on there. And I'm sure it looks fine on an iPhone. You know, let's sidetrack this for 1 second. I've been watching more and more films right before bed, like at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and I've been watching them on my iPhone. And what I like about that experience, it's kind of like sitting in the front row at
really
a movie
is.
theater. You're living the film. You know, it encompasses your entire vision, and it's actually a really unique texture
Yeah.
to the movie.
There's an
going-
experience to it.
Yeah.
That is not terrible.
It's not terrible. It's like, is that my number one favorite way to watch a movie?
No, it
No,
shouldn't be.
of course not. But it's been pretty satisfying. You know, Filmstruck is ending, guys. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I heard.
Yeah.
Super sad as hell.
Yeah.
But it's over, and I have till the 29th to consume as much Filmstruck as possible. That's how I've been doing it on my iPhone.
So you are subscribed to Filmstruck.
I've been a subscriber for a couple of years now.
Oh wow. Okay.
Is that possible? How long has
2
Filmstruck
years.
existed? Okay, a couple years. Exactly, a couple years.
2016.
I always get a couple and a few mixed up.
Yeah, 2016. Anyway, Dunkirk, you know, it kicks off, it doesn't stop. These guys trapped on the beach, the ocean at their backs. England's not coming to save them. Oh, wait, are they? Yes. They're getting in their little boats. And then they come and they rescue them. And they fend off the Nazis. It's a lot of fun. And by fun, I mean it's extremely intense and nerve-wracking.
Yeah,
It
it's
gives you a
harrowing.
panic attack watching it.
Yeah.
And Tom Hardy as the fighter pilot is awesome in it. And yes, you don't know what the hell he's saying, but you don't need to. He's got those eyes and they emote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you smiling at me, Billy?
I'm not. I
Just
like
your
Dunkirk a lot.
handsome.
I was gonna do a Bane voice, and then I decided not to. And I was laughing at my not joke in my head.
I used to have that entire Bane speech memorized where he's outside of Blackgate Prison.
Yeah.
When he's like, and the people.
I didn't see lights until I was already a man.
Yes.
That was good.
Do you know? Look, Dark Knight Rises. The worst voice in that movie turned out to be Christian Bale's Batman voice.
Yeah.
Bane's voice actually has done very well.
Yeah,
over the
I
years.
mean, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
I think that the growl Batman works really, really well in Batman Begins.
Agree.
And then Dark Knight, I can live or let it go. Dark Knight Rises, though, is when it's really...
It goes off the rails.
Yeah, because why is he still doing the gargle voice when Catwoman leaves him by himself?
It's the only way he knows how to talk now. Too many years of doing this.
Yeah, it's strange.
His voice is all
Strange.
fucked up like his knees.
I'm just glad that this Fistful is on track and on point
Yeah.
and not at all off the rails.
Okay.
What's your number 5, D?
You know, great minds and all that.
The fire rises.
Motherfucker.
Your brain's the
Theatricality.
Oh shit, that's good. Oh boy.
My number 5 is also Dunkirk, but specifically, it is my experience in watching it in true IMAX at the Smithsonian.
You're just going to negate everything that I just said.
No. All of that is true. All of that is true. But for me, what I remember the most, the first thing that I think about when I think about that film is my experience or how I watched that film in the format that I saw Dunkirk. I had gone previously to the Smithsonian at Udvar-Hazy in Chantilly to see early footage of The Dark Knight
Rises.
Dark Knight Rises. So
You think darkness is your ally?
Right.
Whoa, that was
That's
Yoda.
Yoda.
That was Yoda. Dude, that's not me.
I can't do bait, apparently.
Look, man.
You're merely a death into the dark.
So I've seen.
I was born to it.
Born to it was I think is the line reading there.
Yeah, Yoda. How'd you let it go from Bane to Yoda?
I don't know.
That was weak as fuck, dude.
Wow.
Come on, man.
I think I'm so funny.
All right. Look, anyway, so having seen what Christopher Nolan likes to do with that particular format in his previous films, I was really looking forward to this particular presentation. And I remember, prior to the release of the film, being nervous that there weren't going to be any theaters that were going to show it in its proper format. But luckily, we got to see it at the Smithsonian. So I'm all about the theatrical experience. I do watch movies at home as well, and I have seen films on my phone. I'm not against that either. But particularly, I love, and I'm always on the podcast talking about a screening I saw in Dolby Prime or what have you, or in 3D, because I do find value in the extra presentation. And in particular with the IMAX format and how large and encompassing that view is. The real IMAX screens, the one in the Smithsonian museums and buildings, those screens are no less than 6 stories tall. And the ones that are at your AMCs, those aren't even real IMAX screens. So when you watch those movies that are 6 stories tall, with the way that those the seats are arranged in the IMAX stadium, the auditoriums, if you're in the right spot, like your entire view, even your periphery, is encompassed with the image on the screen. I saw The Force Awakens there, and that shot when Rey and Finn are running from the TIE fighter attack right before they run to the Millennium Falcon. She was 6 stories tall. She was gigantic. Like her feet were at the very bottom of the auditorium, and her head was at the top, and it was looking at a giant. And I just appreciate that format. And so with the way Christopher Nolan shot Dunkirk, the aerial scenes, the scenes in the cockpit, but then the scenes outside of the cockpit and even down on the beach, with the way he used that format, that coupled with the subject matter and the urgency in the narrative, I just felt like it's one of those rare cinematic things for me where to me, the production is evident, the story is evident, the acting is evident. All these things are coming together. Me sitting in the theater is evident, and it heightens the experience for me as opposed to just watching a movie and just getting lost in just the story and that's it. Not thinking about how good this movie looks or how enveloped in the scene I am. But this film works on so many audio and visual sensory levels, so I gotta have it on my list. Because I don't typically, because of the subject matter, while I'm talking about our Fistful of World War II, because of the subject matter, and it has nothing to do, I don't know that I can't say that, but even prior to joining the military service, like I was never huge into war films just because of the nature of that violence. Like at an early age, I understood that, these guys getting shot and that's real. Like what I'm watching isn't a fictional representation of it, but somewhere that happened, and that's happening to people. So like I couldn't. It was hard for me to watch those types of movies. So it took a while before I could get into World War II films. But anyway, I say all that to say, Dunkirk is a newer film, but it is on my list because it is one of the few films, war films, that I don't have that type of reaction to it. It's palatable for me, and it works on multiple levels. So yeah,
it's so incredibly cinematic. That is one of those movies that could not exist in any other format, right? Dunkirk the book would be radically different.
Yeah.
Dunkirk the play, Dunkirk the radio drama,
yeah,
or the podcast, I guess it would be now. They just you have to do that movie cinematically.
Like what you said, even as what you said about Tom Hardy and how a lot of his audio you can't understand what he's saying, but you don't have to because you can see his eyes. Again, in any other format that wouldn't work and then in the proper format, it works so well, and you can.
It's a total visual experience,
and it's so large, and it's right there in your face. It's inescapable, even in the confines of that small cockpit, because of the format that Nolan shoots it in. He widens that, and you are just right there, you're on the precipice of the windows of his soul.
And it translates whether you're watching it on a projector, a flat screen TV, or an iPhone.
Yeah. All right. I'm so sorry. Hold up. It was
I skipped Billy.
I'm sorry, Billy.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Billy, your number 5.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. So my number 5, I think kind of in line a little bit, Darren, with what you were talking about as far as being able to get into war movies and the way that you sort of engage with them, whether you've had military service or not had military service, they're especially World War II movies or any real war movie based on a real war is just hard to watch. Yeah. It's an experience. Yeah. It's emotionally draining. So the number 5 pick that I want to go to first, I think my list is going to be up all over the place, but I'm going to start out classic, which is Hell in the Pacific with Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mifune. And I mean, the plot of that movie, it's, I was watching it with Danielle and she said, wait, did Castaway rip off this entire movie? And I was like, kind of, kind of. There's a lot of stolen similarities. But basically, Toshiro Mifune plays a Japanese naval officer, and Lee Marvin plays an American pilot, and they're both stranded on the same deserted island, and they discover each other's presence. And from there, things fall out as you would expect, with conflict and realizing that they're isolated there together, and they form a tentative alliance, and then they form what appears to be a genuine friendship, and then they fall out at the end. I think the interesting thing about Hell in the Pacific for me is, Lee Marvin, both Toshiro Mifune and Lee Marvin both served during World War II. I mean, this is a 1968 movie, so they're both of the age to do it. The experience for filming it was, I guess, very difficult for Lee Marvin because he had been active in that area of the world.
He got a Purple Heart. He got shot in the ass.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. And so they filmed in the Peleliu Islands, like on location, and that was a big part of what John Borman wanted to do with that movie. So they were, living on a boat and going back to the beach every day when they were doing shots and getting all that stuff sorted out. And I really can't imagine a more trying experience to throw yourself into as an actor, but not just as an actor, but as a person, and have to bring all those things to the forefront. And the way that the story unfolds in the movie, that, in very local settings, it's very easy for us individually to overcome conflict and see where we have mutual goals and align ourselves and build relationships based on those mutual goals. And as you get yourself reintroduced into larger society and groups, and, towards the end of the movie, they pick up a Time magazine, and both of them have a chance to see the results of what I think is a torpedoing of a Japanese boat. And they're just a bunch of people dead in the water, and it upsets both of them to see this imagery after having worked so closely together. And that's kind of the fallout for it. And they really can't seem to resolve their differences at the end of the movie. And like that's my experience, or at least my understanding or conceptualization of what conflict is that inevitably we can work together and do these things together, but equally inevitably there are limited resources and we come into conflict, and there's too many things that are moving forward in particular directions that even if we do form these individual friendships, it can be very, very difficult to overcome these things. And it's upsetting. It's a movie that leaves you in a very upsetting emotionally place. And I think that's a lot of what I wind up looking for in very specific war movies. So Hell in the Pacific. That's
It's a
my
great
number
movie.
5.
Great pick.
Yeah.
Have you seen the sci-fi remake?
What? No.
Enemy Mine with Luke
Yeah.
Gossett Jr.?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. No. Enemy Mine. Yeah. Yes.
Dennis
Yes. I have
Quaid.
seen that. Yeah.
Very different outcome.
I've also seen the Star Trek: The Next Generation episode.
Yeah.
Dharmaka Tanagra.
So good.
All right, Brian, your number 4.
So my number 4 goes back to a film that I actually saw in the theater, and I think this may have been my first exposure to Jude Law. This was Enemy at the Gates. This is a movie that takes place, I have it up here, during the battle in 1942.
Siege of Stalingrad.
Rachel Weisz is in that, right?
Rachel Weisz is in that, Ed Harris, and it's basically about the Soviet Union sniper. It's about 2 different snipers who are kind of playing this game of cat and mouse. And that was really like my first exposure to Jude Law, and he just really made an impression on me in that movie. The movie itself, I haven't really revisited since I saw it, which came out in 2001. But it's always been a movie that has kind of stayed with me, and I think it was probably more so due to the performances and to the actors in the film. So I don't know. I just always, my memory of that movie is kind of foggy, but for the most part, that's always been a movie that has kind of been. I've always remembered it because of my introduction to Jude Law and a lot of those actors.
He's
in that
partnered
film.
up with Ron Perlman for
Ron
a chunk
Perlman's
of
in
the
that.
movie. And I love their relationship in that film.
Yeah. So it's definitely a movie I would like to go back and revisit. But yes, it's definitely a film I definitely.
It has the gnarliest, coldest sex scene.
Yeah,
movies.
that's what I remember.
That is the thing that stands out.
The
from that
first thing I
movie.
think about when people talk about that movie.
Same.
So sad.
Well, what's so interesting about the Russian army at that time is it was men and women serving alongside each other. It was the last stand for that city and possibly that country.
Yeah.
So they were fighting mean and.
Is that does that open with the run where the guy gets a gun and the other guy gets the clip and they charge the line?
Maybe. I cannot remember.
Yeah.
I have not seen it like Brian since the theater.
The Siege of Stalingrad is fucked up though. Read any of the history books on that, and
Russia
that'll give
just
you
made
nightmares.
a film called Stalingrad, so you can watch that battle from their point of view,
Really?
filmmaking wise.
It's fucking dark.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's an okay movie.
I don't know about the movie, but the event.
And that is definitely not okay.
That's very bad.
All right, Wife Dork,
Yes.
your number 4.
I know how to make a war movie palatable. Make it a musical. So my number 4 is the film South Pacific from 1958. It's a movie. It's a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, and the music is amazing, of course. And the film is directed by Joshua Logan, who I don't know who he is. I'm sure he's very accomplished. Good job. But what I think makes this musical kind of weird and interesting is that they're really trying to take on racism in this film. So there's 2 kind of love stories going on. There is the nurse woman who's living on base, and she's surrounded by all of these soldiers all the time, and then she meets a French plantation owner, and they start falling in love, and he sings Some Enchanted Evening, and he's got an accent, very dreamy, but then she finds out that he has children with his first wife, who is deceased. He's a widower, and they're of mixed race. And so she's just like, I don't know how to feel about this. And then the other storyline is there is Lieutenant Cable, who is a soldier, and he finds a native girl and finds her very beautiful, and they fall in love, and he sings this song called "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught," and it's about like how if you are like you have to be taught to hate. People are not born to hate people of different races. You know, they have to be. It has to be drummed into them from a very young age. So it's like it's taking on these big ideas, but it's through the 1958 lens. So like if you look at the text to "You Have to Be Taught," it's awkward. Like it's just awkward. And of course with 1958 casting, so the people are not, of the race of the characters they're playing and things like that. And it's this is not an excuse, but it's a product of its time, right? And like I admire the effort, like the idea of, well, racism is wrong and there needs to be, and art is supposed to, this piece of art can explain that. But then in doing so, it's not the most modern take on it.
Yeah.
But the music, like I said, is amazing. I think that the intent is good, and I think that it's a pretty fun movie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Number 4, South Pacific.
All right. Brad, your number 4.
Number 4, I'm going with another Lee Marvin movie. This one from 1980, The Big Red One.
Yeah.
As directed by Samuel Fuller. Interesting, this is the only World War II movie to depict D-Day from somebody who landed on D-Day with the infantry. Sam Fuller was there on that day, and he attempts to recreate it here. Now, he's shackled by a really low budget. It was a long journey to get this film in front of cameras. It's produced by Roger Corman's younger brother, Gene. But with the money that they have and the talent of Sam Fuller and the actors, Lee Marvin playing the sergeant of this group of soldiers, Robert Carradine is basically playing young Sam Fuller, Mark Hamill is Griff, Kelly Ward and Bobby DiCiccio are the other two soldiers in the unit, and it's a non-narrative in the sense that the film meanders along with the division, right? So they go to Africa, they have their experiences in Africa. They go to Sicily, they have their experiences in Sicily, and then they have their experiences in D-Day, and then they have their experiences at the Falkenau concentration camp. So it's not like there's like A to B plot points. It's just a day in the life of infantrymen during World War II. Yeah. And told with a sense of honesty from the filmmaker. Obviously it's filtered through memory and the emotion that's attached to that. So it's a really unique World War II film. There's not a lot like this one out there. And as Billy pointed out, Lee Marvin also has served, not on the Western Front, but on the Eastern, or the Pacific, I should say. And it's a good movie. You can see that the seams of its production, and a lot of the film was cut and chopped within its theatrical cut. Although now there is a director's cut available on DVD and Blu-ray that's certainly better than the theatrical cut, but still not probably the vision that Fuller dreamed of. Now, Fuller did have the opportunity to write a novelization of the book of the film, so you can read his book version of this story. And
how different from the film is it?
Well, it's very similar in terms of what happens, and a lot of the stuff that's missing from the theatrical cut is in the book itself. And it's much more trapped in the language of Sam Fuller than the film even is. But as a companion piece, I think it's a really interesting experience. And Sam Fuller's another one of those guys that if you have a Filmstruck account right now, you can watch a bunch of his early movies right there on Filmstruck, and I would recommend that you do so.
When I was in basic training, I used to always think about that movie because there was a cadence, like when we were marching, and one of the lines goes, he starts out, Big Red One. So actually, I'm gonna sing this, and
Yeah.
when I say it, you have to repeat it because it'll make it sound like it's supposed to sound. All right.
Okay.
So I'm calling cadence. That's just what they call it, right? So this is how cadence goes. Big red one,
Big red
one,
patch on my shoulder,
Patch
on my shoulder.
pick up your rifle and follow me.
Pick up your rifle and follow me.
I'll lead the infantry.
I'll lead the infantry.
Yay!
Yay.
I think that's how it goes. It's been
For a second, I thought you said
years.
pick up your wife and follow me. Pick up your wife and follow me.
That too. It's been like 9 years since I sang that cadence, so I'm sorry if I got it wrong.
Well, as a kid, what was interesting about this movie is you're a Star Wars maniac, right?
Yeah.
And you want to see other Mark Hamill films. There aren't many of them. And so that's naturally how I came to this film. You're like, oh, Luke Skywalker's in this.
okay.
It's a very different character.
Yep. All right, I didn't forget you this time, Billy. You're number 4.
Okay, well,
I gave you
so
echo.
when, so I guess I am going to be a bit all over the place, and I'm
Yeah.
going to take some creative license with the World War II Fistful of Nomer. It's funny that you mentioned Star Wars, Brad. When we watched The Last Jedi, the opening sequence of The Last Jedi, that campaign against the
bomber
Dreadnought
run.
destroyers, and the bomber run. It's been a long time since I've been in the theater and seen a bombing run on something that harkens so clearly back to like those like big screen epics where you kind of see the bombs dropping and them going after it. And like the whole setup of the movie is sort of a naval campaign in a war that is not I think analogous exactly in a one-to-one way with World War II, but it's similar
Star Wars
conceptually.
has always borrowed heavily from the imagery of World War II.
For sure.
You know, the TIE fighter attack on the Millennium Falcon is also from the strafing fire of
Yeah.
those World War II movies like the Dam Busters.
I think the reason that I hone in on The Last Jedi, especially that opening sequence for that particular one, is because I think Rian Johnson leaned way the fuck into that, even in the way that they're costumed and the way that they shoot the sequence in terms of triggering the bombs to fall out, even at the expense, I think, of maybe some physics of a fight in space where it doesn't quite make sense. Like, why do you have to do a bombing run to drop bombs in zero?
yeah.
I don't totally understand that, but it fucking looked amazing, and it really was ripped right out of that World War II imagery. So that's my number 4.
All right. My number 4, I'm gonna go with Fury. The David Ayer film. What?
I could see Brian's laptop.
Oh, it's on his list too. You know what? So when this movie came out, like I was not and still am not the biggest David Ayer fan, right? Even in spite of Suicide Squad, I enjoy Suicide Squad. It's not great, but you know what? I enjoy it. But I was never a big, huge David Ayer fan. And for whatever reason, when Fury was about to come out, I just remember like a bad connotation like with his name. And I can't remember why.
Because he's a monster of a human being.
Probably that. And so, but I remember being excited about the cast of the film. Shia LaBeouf's on set antics about knocking his own teeth out and cutting his face with a knife, cutting scars into his face, like his whole method approach.
He kept a cut on his face open the entire movie.
Yeah.
Because
That's
he's
a
Shia
amateur.
LaBeouf and he does not totally understand method acting.
Yeah, that's nuts. And John Barenthal, who at that time, like I was and still am a huge fan of his.
He's really good at this.
Right. And so like that cat, and then Brad Pitt, Brad Pitt's going to show up and do Brad Pitt.
He's good in
and
it.
he's great in it, and I enjoy him. So, but I can't. I'm just saying that like I wasn't excited to see Fury because of Brad Pitt, like because I know Brad Pitt's going to show up and do his thing, and so. But I came for the cast, and David Ayer has a particular vibe to his films, and it's very overly masculine. It's bro-y. It's very rough, and that's also in Fury. But I found the dynamic that the close quarters aspect of the film, because it takes place largely inside the confines of the tank, And I just found that close quarters dynamic of having those characters interact with each other, I just found that interesting. And actually, Michael Pena's in it, and he's great in it as well. So all these actors that I enjoy watching on screen, getting to have these exchanges in close proximity, these personal exchanges that fuel into this being a group of people that you're supposed to buy that have spent an enormous amount of time to cramp together in this machine, thus them having this particular type of relationship with each other, with one another. And so I just felt like that aspect of the movie really works. And then for a movie about tanks aren't fast vehicles. They can move, but tanks aren't typically fast vehicles. So for a movie about tanks that has tank warfare in it, I found those action sequences surprisingly well executed, and they lent a sense of urgency to these battles, these machines that are really heavy and can't really move that fast. But I don't know. I like the way that the sequence was constructed, and that the final siege at the end, like I found that effective as well. So I don't know. I really enjoyed this film. I'm surprised that I dig a David Ayer film as much as I do. But I dig it. So that's my number 4. Brian, your number 3
is Fury, for everything that you just said.
Yeah,
so,
great minds think alike.
There you go. That's my number 3.
Yeah. All right.
You don't have anything else to contribute to that conversation, Brian?
No, not really. No, but just quickly, like I said, David Ayer just kind of came from like that era of doing a lot of these L.A. crime drama movies. Of course, he wrote Training Day, movies like Street Kings, End of Watch, which I enjoy End of Watch. And so to see him kind of take on a World War II film, I thought was interesting. But I think what you were saying, Darren, as far as being in the close quarters and having kind of like that very masculine and very aggressive style of filmmaking, I think it kind of serves the movie well, having that kind of approach, and to bring his style from making some of those kind of L.A. crime dramas and bringing that into a World War II film. And I always like to see directors who are kind of known for a certain aesthetic and a certain genre or style of film, and to kind of break that and do something different and bring those type of sensibilities into a different type of genre. And I thought he nailed it. I mean, unfortunately, after Fury, what he's done with Suicide Squad, I can't stand that movie. I just think it's terrible. But I do think, but David Ayer, I think, is a very talented director, and I think people give him probably a lot of shit that's probably not deserved to some degree. I mean, I get it, like, especially when you see him at Comic-Con and he's throwing out barbs and doing all these different things and stuff like that. But
I've also watched his movies.
But I mean, he has probably the same ratio with like any other director. I mean, he's made some great films and he's made some terrible films. I like
End of Watch.
End of Watch is good. Fury is good, of course, but. I don't know if he was associated with Harsh Times, but
he was.
Did he direct that?
He sure did.
I liked. I don't know how you feel about Harsh Times.
I'm gonna tell you right now, Brian. Not a fan.
Not a fan. Okay.
I like End of Watch.
Damn.
Harsh Times. I enjoy Christian Bale's performance in Harsh Times. I probably need to go back and rewatch that film, but I think
which one is Harsh Times?
Oh man, is that with Jay Hernandez is in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It's
exactly.
a crap cop movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
it's like Training Day.
Oh.
Like End of Watch.
Oh.
But
like Street Kings.
I see your point.
But that goes to my point of like why I thought he did a great job with Fury, because he was able to do something a bit different.
The coolest thing about Fury for me was that it was an entry point to a conversation with somebody that I work with who, when they first came up in the Army, their first job was moving tanks around. And that when that was in the theaters, he saw that it was in the theaters, and it was kind of a topic of conversation where I got a chance to ask him questions about what that experience was. No, I mean, he's not World War II age. He's 60s, early 60s. But to have a perspective of somebody who is clearly moving heavy artillery around so close to the closing out of World War II, which was a big heavy artillery era, like that, it's an interesting thing to be able to connect with people through.
That final tank battle is
right.
intense.
Yeah. And to have it filmed at night, which a lot of night sequences never look good, and they were actually, it was well lit, it was well
gorgeous looking movie.
Yeah, it was well choreographed. You knew where everything was. It was well done. I give David Ayer credit for that one.
All right, I gotta pop that Blu-ray, and I bought it, and I haven't watched it since I bought it. Anyway, Wife Dog,
Yes.
I need to know your number 3.
My number 3, like.
You have to sing back to me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I got
We haven't
so
sung.
self-conscious.
We haven't sang to each other in a while.
I know. Okay. Redo it.
Wife Dog.
Yes.
Your
That wasn't
number-
Okay, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
It's okay. All right, Wife Dog.
Yes.
Your number 3.
My number 3 has a 43% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. My number 3, it's actually up to 50 at this point.
Oh,
So
nice.
you go, Robert Sean Leonard. My number 3 is Swing Kids.
Oh, I've never seen that one.
It's one that I watched a lot. Like my
That's
sister.
a World War II movie?
Well, it's technically pre-World War II. It's leading into World War II.
Okay.
It's my sister was majorly obsessed with Robert Sean Leonard, of all people. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I won't argue. I mean, Harold Perrineau. But it's a movie about these kids who are Hitler Youth by day, swing dancers by night, and the idea is they were very much into the big band swing scene, and they were kind of record aficionados, and they get in kind of like a little argument with one of their friends, and they accidentally destroy one of his records, and so they decide that they're going to steal him a radio to make up for the record that they broke. And so they go to steal the radio, and they get caught, and by I guess a Nazi, Gestapo or something, and and he says, okay, well, you won't suffer any kind of consequences if you join Hitler Youth. So Robert Sean Leonard and Christian Bale join Hitler Youth. And they think they're being all subversive about it, like, yeah, we're not really Hitler Youth because we're cool dancing kids. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, Robert Sean Leonard drinks the Kool-Aid a little bit, and he kind of gets into it, and which is disappointing. And then somebody commits suicide with a piece of a record, with a broken record.
No.
And I'm like, that is a very meaningful, heartfelt, heart-wrenching film. I haven't seen it since I was like a teen, but I loved the soundtrack a whole lot. And actually, me and my friends did a tight 4-part arrangement of By Mir Bisduchesne for our high school talent show.
Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, and I really enjoyed this movie, but it's been a few years.
Okay. Swing Kid.
Yeah.
All right, Brad, your number 3.
Since we're all
I realized Gestapos and Nazis are not the same thing. I saw your faces. I was just talking and I said something wrong. I don't know a lot of stuff.
They're pretty similar.
Okay, thank you. I've been reading a lot of. Okay,
I had no face.
Billy had a face. I'm just looking at you.
I do have a face. You got me.
I don't know facts and things. I mostly watch musicals. Okay, and it is kind of a
I
musical.
don't think
'cause
any of
it's-
that was wrong.
Okay, good. Phew, I take that back then.
Gestapo or Nazis?
Okay, good. Taking it all back.
Well, since we're all naming mediocre movies with Swing Kids and Fury,
Damn.
I will add to that with my mediocre movie pick that I also cherish.
I had 2 mediocre picks.
What was your first mediocre
I had
pick?
Pearl Harbor.
We'd already blocked
No,
it
Pearl
out.
Harbor's straight up shit, Brian.
Okay. All right, you were right. I was right.
I'm going with the 2002 haunted submarine movie.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Directed by David Twohy and
Did
written.
Pitch Black.
What?
That's
Who did
right.
Pitch Black? David Twohy did Pitch
Yeah,
Black.
he did Pitch Black, and it was co-written by Darren Aronofsky.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And it stars Bruce Greenwood, Olivia Williams, Holt McNally, Scott Foley, Zach Galifianakis, Dexter Fletcher.
Zach Galifianakis is in that movie?
Yep. And Dexter Fletcher, the co-director of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Not credited.
What year did this come out?
2002.
Okay.
And the story is that the USS Tiger Shark, a Navy submarine, gets a distress call and answers it, and a British PBY has been blown up by a U-boat, and they pick up the survivors, one of the survivors being a nurse, played by Olivia Williams, and these two other dudes, and one of them may or may not be a German. And while they're dealing with the tension of that situation, they start to encounter spooky shenanigans aboard. And like a lot of mediocre ghost stories, the mystery that is ultimately resolved to deal with those spirits is not technically satisfying. But everything building up to the climax of the movie is really, really compelling. And I love the performances from everybody involved. And I think David Twohy, he shoots a really spooky sub. And the Navy rarely gets their own films. And if they do, they happen to be submarine movies. And, you know, you got to take those Navy stories where you can get them. And, yeah, this is one of the better ones, despite its mediocre, maybe bad ending.
All right. Great pick. Billy, your number 3.
Okay, so I'm gonna swing away from mediocre and shitty movies, if that's okay.
Swing kids away.
Oh, I should have said that. That would have been a much better transition. Fuck, I fucked it up. No, I'm gonna go to Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. I'm taking it. But
someone was going to.
Someone was going to. But I'm going to take specifically the opening segment of that movie. Partly for kind of what I was talking about with Hell in the Pacific, where I think very specifically at the beginning of Inglourious Bastards, what Quentin Tarantino does very, very well is he captures the tension of what it was like to live in Nazi-occupied France, especially when, for example, you were hiding Jewish friends or family members, and the terror of that experience. I think in terms of the way that he presents that on screen with the slow reveal where the inquiry starts and he's defending the questions, and through the course of the back and forth that the guy and the Nazi inspector are having, the camera slowly pans down to beneath the floorboards and shows you the family that he is hiding. And I think that that escalation of tension is one of the best that I have seen on camera. And I think it works very well specifically for the movie that he's set up. But I also think that it works very well for just capturing the sheer terror of answering a series of very basic questions from somebody who knows that you are hiding something that puts you in life or death situation. And the terror that he experiences through the course of that conversation. I think it's one of my favorite in terms of, I guess, not enjoyable, but just in awe of the craftsmanship that went into that scene.
All right. Great pick. My number 3 is also Inglourious Bastards. I would like to highlight specifically the third act of that film, in which the stuff with Shoshana, and then like things catch on fire, and then Hitler gets shot in the face. While I don't feel like I don't know, like I like how the opening of the movie is a ratcheting of tension that you just talked about, Billy, and how the end of that film also is a ratcheting of tension. The build up to, are they going to be able to pull this off? And then when it culminates with them actually pulling it off, and the film getting set ablaze, and Hitler getting Swiss cheesed in the face.
Yeah,
for me, I just admire the power of movies to be able to do that with history.
Yeah,
to be able to change history in that way to to have some sort of catharsis.
Yeah, exactly.
But then when we changed the order of when Freddie Mercury had AIDS, was it before Live Aid? Was it after Live Aid? We all got a shit on it.
Oh, that's
man.
a thing? I didn't know that was a thing.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Brad will have brought it up in our review cast.
Oh, okay. I gotta go back and.
You know, when he's standing over him, like shooting him in the face with a fucking machine gun at the end of that movie, and the way that they zoom in on the look on the guy doing the shooting, where it's like, I'm there for that, because the rest of the movie, like the emotional experience of Inglourious Bastards, is honest, and I think it's true to history. The catharsis at the end, so Hitler gets shot in the face, like that, like you said though, like you need that at the end of that movie, and it really makes, I think, the movie.
Yeah, and that, I mean, the sequence in the underground pub. I mean, you talk about tension.
yeah.
Holy shit, man! Like before everything goes ape shit and everyone gets shot up. Like that is the most intense scene in the movie for me. Sometimes it depends on what mood I'm in. It's hard to watch. Like I just can't stand. Like the tension is so I can't take it, and it's executed so well.
But it's such a simple like setup. Like okay, so the spy party's in France and they got to meet their contact. Oh shit, the bar's underground. What happens?
Yeah.
Some fucking random SS officer comes in and messes everything. It's amazing. Like it's extremely well executed for such a like not out there setup.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my number 3. Brian, your number 2. I'm trying to think what it could be. I have an idea.
Just go ahead and say it.
Nope.
Say
you
it.
say yours first.
What? Then it don't make any sense.
Because if I'm wrong,
no, because
I'm gonna lie and be like, yes, that's what I
exactly. So just tell me.
No.
Man, I swear you make things so difficult. Anyway, my number 2 is 2, right?
Yes.
All right, Tuskegee
Airmen.
Oh my God.
Yes. We said the same time. We've practically finished each other's sentences. Duh. Anyway, great pick.
That's why he's got first dibs on your widow.
Right. God damn it.
Oh man.
No.
Oh man, Lisa always got my back. There you go. Thank you. Anyway, the Tuskegee Airmen. It's an HBO TV movie from 1995 starring Lawrence Fishburne. It has a who's who of actors, especially black actors around that time. I think Andre Braugher, Alan Payne was in it, Courtney B. Vance, Cuba Gooding Jr., Mekhi Phifer. This was a movie that was definitely a staple, especially in the African American community when this came out. Like people really gravitated to this film, and it kind of tells the story of the first African American airmen in World War II down in Tuskegee, Alabama, and how they were kind of trying to be discredited and to be airmen, and then fortunately, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt. Sent them to I think it was the 332nd to they were deployed to escort the flying fortresses heavy bombers because they were getting shot down. So it's just an amazing story to tell around this time of these men serving their country. And of course, this also Tuskegee University down in Alabama was named after them. I have some friends of mine who actually went down, went to that university.
My father did.
Oh, he went to Tuskegee University?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I had a friend of mine who went to Tuskegee back in the mid-90s. Late 90s. So it was really after this movie came out. So, yeah, this was just a movie that a lot of people talked about around this time. And, you know, they tried to have a cinematic film about this with Red Tails.
Oh, yeah.
And it just never took. And I would love to see a movie, not necessarily a remake of Tuskegee, but I would love to, because this was the HBO film, and I would love to see a theatrical film, because I think there's a story to tell that you can get to a mass audience, to a wider audience to tell this story. But yeah, Tuskegee Airmen is a great film, and I definitely want to go back and rewatch it. I haven't seen it in a while. I wonder if it's available on HBO now, if you have it. They have older
movies. They have a lot of their older stuff on there.
I wonder if I gotta check that. Yeah, so that's my number 2.
All right.
Which you didn't get.
All right, I didn't.
Exactly.
Wife door.
Yes,
What's your number 2?
I'm waffling right now.
Why?
Because I picked as my number 2 a movie that's just so profoundly classic and
Don't pick it so I can put it back on my list.
Take it.
but part of me I don't know because I don't know.
If you let it go,
I went so far as to cut and
Let it go?
paste my notes out of Wikipedia.
Do it. You got to go with it. Go with your gut.
My gut says to just turn this microphone off and roll over and die, but I won't.
Don't go with your gut.
Don't go.
No.
My gut has shit for brains. High fidelity. All right. Very close.
That's a good line.
That's my number 2, guys. Okay. Now I put as my number 2 Casablanca.
Okay.
So
Are you keeping that?
I am gonna keep it. Because then
pick,
it would be
Lisa.
Life is Beautiful, and you would make fun of me.
I've
even
never
though
seen Life is Beautiful.
Life is Beautiful made me cry so hard.
You could pick that.
I'm not going to. Now I'm picking Casablanca to spite you. Everybody knows the story. Expat Rick. He tries to not get involved because he's a bastard. But then an old flame comes back, and she is the spouse of a radical person,
Resistance
fighter, and she chooses to stay with her husband despite the mutual feelings because of the cause, and he does his part to help her.
Rick
He
has,
kind of gives her away in kind of a weird misogynist kind of fashion,
does
but
it amount
he
to a
looks
hill of
good
beans,
doing
Lisa?
it.
Oh, I see.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Amazing script. Got lots of witticisms. Brad will give another few examples. Beautiful friendship. Other words.
The stuff dreams are made of. What? That's not it. That's
Yoda?
That's
Again?
Falcon.
Anyway. It's a classic, and it's a classic for a reason. I feel like it's been on Fistfuls. I know.
Isn't it the AFI's number 2 or 3 on the AFI's top 100?
It's way up there.
Yeah, I think it's in the top 3. I want to say it's either 2 or 3.
I think it's 3, and 2 is Godfather, and Citizen Kane is 1, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But we can look that up using the internet if we wanted to, or the listeners can.
There you go. Yeah, there you
Come on.
go.
Don't
All
make
right.
us do the work.
All right, Brad. You're number 2.
Ingrid Bergman. She's a jewel. She's luminous. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, number 2 is probably going to be Casablanca.
Yeah.
I'm going with Casablanca. I love this movie. It's a miracle that it's as good as it is.
Yeah.
That script had like 13 names written all over it at one point, putting all those amazing, iconic bits of dialogue together. It's astonishing that the film is as good as it is, directed by Michael Curtiz. Bogart's amazing in the film as this wretched nihilist who's just given up on even attempting to push back against the Nazis, and he's found a nice little place where he's making a little money in Casablanca, and he doesn't have to worry about the war outside its borders. But good luck making that happen. And then, of course, his old flame shows up, and his heart is rekindled, and his passion inflamed, and he goes up against those damn dirty Nazis.
Lightly. He lightly goes up against them.
He
inconveniences them.
I guess is his way
I thought
into
this
it.
was your pick, Lisa.
It is my pick.
And that's what's interesting about the movie, though, is how it is not a Raiders of the Lost Ark. We're going to explode a bunch of Nazis using God's wrath.
Yeah.
Which is also good.
It's maybe it's my number
Technically,
one.
they do that to themselves. No big deal.
Well, God's judgment. Yeah, I guess you're right. Like
I think
that's
whoever
that whole
opened it
story.
would get face melted regardless. I think was the whole point.
Yeah. Well, the whole story is, if Indiana Jones wasn't in it, would anything have changed for the Nazis?
It wouldn't have been such a good movie.
No, but I have always disliked that logic because the logic is the story of Indiana Jones, and so he's in this scenario. He doesn't necessarily have to save the day. He's there to bear witness or not by closing his eyes.
Wretched nihilist.
Wretched nihilist. Yeah, that's it. Casablanca. The end.
Rick the Dick. That's what I call him.
Yeah. I was gonna say Wretched Nihilist is my favorite characterization of him, but Rick the Dick is way better.
All right.
Honestly, her husband way more handsome than Humphrey Bogart.
disagree.
I like a
look
pretty
like
man.
a man. He looks like a child.
Oh,
He's a child's
you
face.
got to put that Humphrey Bogart through the rock tumbler. Let's get some of that off, some of the grit off.
All right, Billy, your number 2.
Now I want to crawl under the bed and die.
All right, so I guess since we're going cinematic classics, I'll go back for another cinematic classic with The Bridge on the River Kwai.
All right.
I quit. That's my number 1.
I'm sorry.
Face.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna keep going, but I'm sorry.
Aw.
No,
Billy the Willy, that's what I call him.
Oh,
I'm sorry, did I bring up childhood memories? Edit that out.
Billy the
We're
Willy.
trying to be the kinder, nicer kid mod.
all of a sudden we're back in 4th grade. Oh, no. So I think the thing, at least that I'll speak to specifically about The Bridge on the River Kwai, is this is one of the first World War II movies that I remember seeing that was just really kind of a painful, epic story to watch. I think I must have been 12 or 13, like the first time that I saw it. And the story sucked me in, and I was engaged with their struggle and their relationship, twisted and confused with the bridge that they're building through the course of the movie, and how conflicted it is. I think in later years, I'm a little bit disappointed. I think the thing that I like about Hell in the Pacific is the way that they depict Toshiro Mifune and Lee Marvin on like the same level. I dislike some of the ways that they portray the Japanese side of the story in The Bridge on the River Kwai. I think that there's room for a more complex movie there with slightly fair characterization of the way that goes. Maybe fair is not quite the right word. But their struggle with the bridge, I related a lot to that. And I think that's what I keep going back to when I think about like World War II movies especially, is just irreconcilable conflict and the ringer, emotional, physical meat grinder that it puts people through. And that was, I think, the first time that I really clocked to that cinematically. So that's my number 2 pick. You're going to be so fucking mad when you hear my number 1 pick too.
Oh no!
Because it's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Is that your new number 1? I'm doing it.
That's fine.
No. All right. Before we get to that,
Technically, Raiders of the Lost Ark is not a World War II movie.
It's pre-World War II, right? Because
Well,
the U.S. is not in.
It's pre-American.
It's pre-U.S. World War
involvement.
II. Yeah. So it's not World War II then, because it
Well,
doesn't
it's-
become a world war until the U.S. gets involved.
That's right.
Eat a dick, Europe.
I had
no.
Dunkirk as my number 5, man.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
oh,
I'm a global thinker.
all right. My number 2 is Grave of the Fireflies.
That's a good one.
Pick.
So, Grave of the Fireflies is about a young brother and sister, a very young brother and sister, who are separated from their parents due to a firebombing of their village. And the rest of the movie is just them surviving in this. World War II is winding down at this point, and they're just trying to survive. So, this film came out in 1988. When I had eventually seen the film, I had been watching anime for a long time, but I had only been watching anime that was fantasy in nature or had some fighting robots or action oriented. And so but even watching those types of anime, like there would be people dying in it and there would be blood, and so I understood that okay, these Japanese movies, these Japanese animated films they depict violence in ways that American cartoons don't. Okay, I get it. I dig it. So that was like my extent of my perception of anime and the stories that it would tell. So I see Grave of the Fireflies. I come upon it at a time where I was just looking for anything that looked like it was animated in Japan. And so I watched it. I just like a blind buy type of deal. I saw the characters on the front of it. They looked like they were just Japanese in design, so I bought the movie. And I start watching the film, and this was Grave of the Fireflies was the movie that made me understand that animation, not just Japanese animation, but animation period, can be and is being used to tell any and every type of story. The story doesn't have to have some type of fantastical element. It doesn't have to be comedic in nature. It doesn't have to be for children. It doesn't have to depict superheroes or giant robots or Transformers. It can be about some real shit, like real heavy shit. And by the end of this movie, man, I was crying so fucking hard, and I mean like ugly crying. And I don't know, I just find that such a profound statement again about just the power of art in all its mediums, and the fact that something that a lot of people dismiss as something for children or something that is silly just because it is animated. There's a story, and there's a heart, and there's a tragedy, and there's a realness in this animated picture that a lot of live action films fail to attain or get across to the audience correctly. And so I don't know, I don't know, it's one of those films that you watch it, it's really good, but it's really hard for you to rewatch it. Yeah. It's like one of those hard watches, like what I imagine Schindler's List to be. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it has to be on my list. It's my number 2. So, Grave of the Fireflies. Brian, your number 1.
So, my number 1 should be pretty obvious.
Oh, shit. He looked directly at you, Darren.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I failed. It's not obvious. Fuck, we just died.
Oh, no.
What is it?
Anyway, Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, mother...
What? Okay.
That's my number 1.
It can still be your number 1.
Yay.
But, Saving Private Ryan came out 20 years ago this year.
Damn.
1998. This is probably the movie that's probably the most, I guess, most recent World War II movie that's probably the most recognizable and the most known, most notable, especially to a lot of younger people. Always reference probably Saving Private Ryan. And I think do so to probably still Steven Spielberg and his direction, especially that opening scene with the invasion of Normandy on the Omaha beach. And just he really gives you that feeling of really being with those soldiers, like being on the ground with them, especially when you see those boats open up and then just that gunfire that they get, and then being on the beach and then seeing it from the POV of Tom Hanks's character and seeing people like looking for their limbs and stuff like that. It's just, I mean, it's such an amazing feat to be able to capture that on screen, and then just this journey going on with with these characters, who's who of actors who were very not really that recognizable at the time, but have really grown to have some really, really good careers. Of course, you have Tom Hanks and Tom Sizemore, but Ed Burns, Barry Pepper, Adam Goldberg, Vin Diesel, Giovanni Ribisi, Jeremy Davies, Matt Damon. Then you get cameos by Ted Danson and Paul Giamatti and Dennis Farina. All these, I mean, it's just
Nathan Fillion.
Nathan Fillion is in. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He's the first Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? My brothers are dead.
Yeah, that's right.
So confused.
Jeez, I haven't seen this movie, guys. How does the war turn out?
No.
But I mean, yeah, just even the look of the film, it just has this very bleak, like this sepia tone look to it, and there's just certain moments in this movie that just hit me so profoundly. Just when when Giovanni Ribisi is
don't spoil it for
oh,
me.
that's right. You haven't seen it.
I have not seen it, but I'm not listening.
Okay,
so you can say whatever you want. How was that for singing, Darren?
I loved it.
It was great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Master's degree.
Yeah, but yeah, there's really, really great moments, character moments with character like Tom Hanks. Just absolutely amazing. So yeah, this is a film I'm definitely eager to, because I haven't seen it in a while. So it's definitely a movie I'm eager to rewatch. But definitely is.
Lisa and I have been going through Spielberg's films chronologically this year, and our next one is Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, nice. All right, so you've gotten pretty far.
All right.
Saving Private Ryan has on. Like, I don't know if you guys have it, but like lists of deaths that have affected you most on screen. Number 2 is in the upstairs when he re-encounters. Number 2 all time most fucked me up death on screen.
I feel like we have not done a fistful of death.
Shit.
That's a good.
That's a good one. We already know Billy's number 2.
Put a button.
That's
in
okay.
that. Put a
That,
button
yeah,
in
that one
We've
is.
done like head explosions.
Did we?
So that would be Darren's entire list. Would just be head explosions.
Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, please. Put a button in that too. All right, let's see. So, Wife Dork,
Yes.
you're number 1.
My number 1 is yet another Rodgers and Hammerstein musical because I can't help myself, and it is The Sound of Music, 1965. Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer. Julie Andrews is a nun, and then she's not, and she marries Christopher Plummer, and with all the kids making clothes out of curtains. We've all seen this movie. When I was a kid, we would watch it and rewatch it, and every time, like up to probably to way too long, I would always forget it was about Nazis. Always. And so I'd be like, this is just such a nice movie about, a woman like finding her true vocation, right? Like not everybody's called to the nunnery. Some people are called to bone Christopher Plummer and teach his children how to sing and become famous and sing Brian's favorite song, The Little Drummer Boy. That's them. But not in this musical. That's a sequel, I guess. But then, like, Christopher Plummer, Captain Von Trapp, receives a telegram. Austria gets annexed by Germany and by the Nazis. And so he's called to go to a German naval base, but he's like, I'm totally anti-Nazis. And all of his friends are like, And so he's like, well, we have to get out of Austria. And so they try to escape. It doesn't work. The kids are kind of becoming famous for their singing. They're doing festivals and stuff. And so after a particular festival, they sing as a family, and then they escape and go hide out in the nunnery, and the nuns hide them so that they can escape Austria. But the most heartbreaking moment for child Lisa is so one of the big numbers. Like as I age, like I'm just like when I was a kid, I was just like I just want to grow up and play Liesel. I want to sing I Am 16 going on 17, and then I was like I could totally play Maria. I would be an amazing Maria. Now I'm like okay, I have to wait maybe 20, 40, 30 more years, and then maybe I can play Mother Superior. But yeah, so I actually was in this particular play in high school. Yeah, I was called back for Maria.
Oh shit!
But I was just I was an extra nun.
No,
just an extra nun. Yeah, but anyway, Rolf. So she sings 16 going on 17 with Rolf Liesel does, and then he joins the Nazi youth, and that's a bummer, and she's heartbroken. But then, a spoiler alert, he's the one who he finds them. But then he calls out, they're not here! So he allows them to escape. But he's still a fucking Nazi, so fuck you, Rolf.
Oh,
and
right,
that's my number 1.
All right. Sorry, Rolf. Sorry, not sorry. Brad, you're...
But you don't see that coming when you're like, lonely goat herd, everything is wonderful. Okay, I'm done.
Brad, you're number 1.
World War II, we often call it the good war. It's the necessary war. If we hadn't entered that conflict, who knows what modern hellscape we would be living in. There might even be a Nazi in the White House today. Wow, that'd be so different from where we are right now. But to challenge the notions of the good war, there is a really interesting film in the early 90s, 1992 to be exact, called A Midnight Clear, that was directed by Keith Gordon, who is the kid from Christine. Mm-hmm. He grew up to be the singing detective director, as well as A Midnight Clear. Right. Film stars, Peter Berg, Kevin Dillon, Ethan Hawke, Gary Sinise, John McGinley, and it's about during the early moments of the Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944, a group of intelligence and reconnaissance soldiers are sent to occupy a chateau that's nearby, and they discover a German troop, and they want to surrender. And it's about how these two opposing groups come to terms with each other in the middle of, or at the beginning of, one of the nastiest battles of the entire war. Another interesting aspect is we tend to think of D-Day as at the end of World War II, but so much hellish fighting laid ahead of those soldiers after the beaches. And the Battle of the Bulge is, one of the most atrocious conflicts. But if you haven't seen it, it had a very tiny release back in the 90s, but it used to play on HBO all the time. And that's where I caught it originally. And I always thought, I like Keith Gordon as a director, the films I've seen of his. And I'd like to see him keep cranking them out. Anyway.
That's a bridge too far is the Battle of the Bulge, right?
I've never seen A Bridge Too Far.
Oh, that's, yeah. You should. That's good.
All right. What's your number one, Billy?
So my head is in weird places, I think, these days when it comes to World War II movies. The first two movies that I thought of when we said we were going to do a fistful of World War II movies was Dead Snow, which is the Nazis 50 years later coming back to life and fucking some Norwegian tourist snow vacation up.
I would accept that.
Like they do. And then the other movie, which I think is the one that I would pick for this, is White Christmas with Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye. I recognize it's musical. I know that would appeal to Lisa. But I recognize that it's not a World War II movie in and of itself. But I think that one of the things that defined a generation about World War II is the bonds and friendships that were made during the course of the war. And one of the first things that I think of when I think White Christmas is, Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye's characters met through the course of the war, and their creative partnership carries on after the war. And their relationship with their commanding officer is what brings them to New England to put on their musical, is to revitalize his hotel business, because he's gotten out of the army and his business is failing and he's going to have to close up shop and figure out what to do with his life. And because of his leadership through the course of the war and their affection for him as not just a commanding officer, but as an important figure in their life, they put this together so that they can save his hotel business. And I think that those relationships that come out of that war defined the entirety of the 50s and into the 60s. And that, I think, is an important thing to think about, too, when you're talking about World War II and its lasting effects.
A Bridge Too Far is in September of 1944, but it centers around Operation Market Garden.
Market Garden. Yeah. I realized that after I said it out loud, and then I just didn't pursue it because I just realized I was going the wrong direction.
Well, I
yeah,
love
you're
to
right.
tell you that you're wrong.
Thank you.
Now, Billy, now we can sing the Sisters song together. Sisters, never were there such devoted. Come on, Billy, sing with me.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to sing the Sisters line or Bing Crosby's line.
Oh, I don't know. She wore the dress and I stayed home. All kinds of weather, we stick together. Same in the rain or sun. Right?
No, that's exactly it. Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye singing the Sister song is one of the best musical numbers out there.
Yeah, I was being
not
Danny
seen
Kaye
it.
in that moment.
It's great. It's a great movie.
All right.
It's a sweet one.
What is it?
They kiss behind the big tree. Spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
You have it?
That's
You
not a
own it, Brad?
euphemism.
No.
You don't own it? God damn it. I'll check it out. All right. My number one is also Saving Private Ryan. So I said before, one of the reasons why I never got into war films was because of my understanding of it being a depiction of a real life act, right? So as I got older, I started watching war films, and I became okay to some extent with, the depiction of it. It wasn't until Saving Private Ryan that I understood that those depictions of death in the other films were like movie, like Hollywood, like when people get shot and the way that their bodies react, their arms flail and they just die dramatically, and Willem Dafoe in Platoon, like he's got his arms up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Saving Private Ryan was the first war film that had the truest depiction of somebody getting shot or dying. You don't fly back. You know, there's no Paul Verhoeven squib. It doesn't look like that. Most times, if you get shot and you die instantaneously, your body just drops. You just fall straight down. And seeing how accurately Spielberg portrayed the act of war in the film was shocking to me. Like, it was astonishing. Like, still haven't had that type of visceral reaction to on-screen violence, because I knew it to be real. Like, that's how it really looks. So that's one layer removed between me and this artificial thing on screen, right? This depiction of something that happens. And so Then I joined the Army, right? And in basic training, they showed this movie and Black Hawk Down on repeat. And throughout basic training, I saw so much so that I haven't seen Saving Private Ryan since basic training. Like, they would just play it all the time. Whenever we had downtime or whatever, it was one of those two movies that got put on. And I just remember, you know, watching Black Hawk Down and thinking, oh man, like, this is what we're gonna do. This is what I'm training to do. I mean, that movie was like the friggin' recruitment video, right, for the military. But then, like, when we would watch Saving Private Ryan, like what you mentioned, Brian, about the color palette of that film, and it's desaturized, and you put that up next to Ridley Scott's depiction of war in Black Hawk Down, which is oversaturated. It's like Michael Bay'd out, and there's a dourness to it. There is, like, when the landing opens up for them soldiers to come off that boat onto that bridge, and half of them don't even make it off. How they're just discombobulated and they're just trying to get their bearings, let alone pull up a rifle and shoot somebody and defend themselves. When I was in basic training, like, I watching those scenes, like, just watching that film, and specifically those scenes, like, it made me think, man, did I make a bad choice? Did I fuck up? Like, because, yeah, I see this shit over here that Ridley Scott's selling, but then, like,
Captain America, yeah.
This shit over here, like, what about this shit over here? Like, isn't no one else is seeing this shit? Y'all don't see what I'm seeing, right? Like, and it filled me with a sense of dread. It put shit into perspective for me. Like, it made me go, that shit in Black Hawk Down, like, that's Hollywood shit. This shit over here, this feels like more real. And so I remember going through basic training, like, carrying that with me. And then when I got to AIT, like, carrying that with me because of that movie.
What's AIT?
Advanced Individual. So we all of us dorks go to basic training, right? But for AIT, I go to medic school. For Brad, you go to comic book school. Right. AIT
Name my school.
You go to music school.
Yeah.
And then Billy, you go to indie movie school, and Brian, you go to turtle school. My entire experience through basic training and AIT was, there was always this sense of impending doom because of that movie, because of Saving Private Ryan, because of that depiction of violence and the depiction of war. For me, was the truest that I had seen, and so yeah, I have it on my list as number one for that, because, and by the way, when Saving Private Ryan came out, it had such a huge impact, not only in with other films that would come after that, but like in video games. Like, so at that point, there was a Call of Duty is the big series now, but back then there was a series called Medal of Honor, and Medal of Honor, their forte was World War I and World War II military shooting games. And after Saving Private Ryan, the first Medal of Honor that came out post that movie, that the opening of that game is you storming that beach.
It was like Saving Private Ryan as a video game.
Right. You were playing that Saving Private Ryan, right. And then other games would come out and try to emulate the same type. So Steven Spielberg influence not only was seen within films, but it spread out into video games. And so I don't know, like, I know that's always a really cool and interesting fact when I think about that film. And me as being a gamer, you know, seeing the movie, but then also seeing it bleed into this other thing that I really like, and how it has affected even to this day. Like the structure of like the Call of Duty games all stem from that Medal of Honor game opening with that big moment in military history. And so now in all these these Call of Duty games, there's a big moment, whether it be artificially made up a type of incursion or a skirmish, or something that was a recreation of a battle that was in, you know, the Middle East or something like that. It all stems from Steven Spielberg's take on that moment in history.
And it spawned into the Band of Brothers miniseries.
Band of Brothers miniseries,
and the Pacific, which are excellent.
Right. So yeah, that's my number one. Listeners, hit us up on social media at ItModcast and let us know what your fistful of World War II are. And yes,
Go see Overlord.
Go see Overlord. I dug it.
Yeah, it's cool.
You'll dig it. You might dig it.
Oh yeah, you guys all saw that at Fantastic
You said
Fest.
it, Billy. I wasn't gonna bring it up. Man.
Take a shot, Billy.
I wasn't gonna bring it up, but yeah, we did see it at Fantastic Fest. But we saw it again. You know, so yeah.
I mean, but Nazi medical experiments gone wrong. You know, Dead Snow, also good.
Not as good as Dead Snow. Billy.
Damn,
lower
Brad.
those expectations.
Oh wow! All right.
Dead Snow is great.
Actually, Dead Snow's a great movie. Yeah, it's hard to come to.
Overlord
Dead Snow.
has its moments.
It does.
The opening the scene, the World War II reality of Overlord is amazing.
That's a great opening.
Really impressive. So yeah, follow us at ItModcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can follow that guy at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, and at Brian William Young on Facebook. And you can follow Wife Dork at Sidewalk Siren and at Bake Dork on Twitter and Instagram. And she is at Sidewalk Siren on Letterboxd. Brad Gullickson is at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped. And Billy Dash is at WB Dash on Twitter and Instagram. And I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias. That's going to do it for us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Go watch some more movies. Thank you all for listening. And until next time.